Hello, my name is John Reynolds. Welcome to Extraordinary Life Stories. On this episode, I'm talking with David Smith MBE. David is a Nike athlete whose inspirational journey is entwined with overcoming challenges and adversity. David is a true human embodiment of resilience, determination, and triumph. I know I'm going to love talking with David. Let's get into it. David, thank you so much for joining me.
John, it's an honour and thank you for the invite.
Absolute pleasure. Tell me, who is David Smith?
So I think if you'd asked me that at different times in my life, I would have given you an extremely different answer. I think in the early days, David Smith was fixed. He had a fixed identity. So if you'd asked who's David Smith, he would have replied with it as I'm an athlete. And I am attached to the values of what the Olympic values were Sitius, Atius, Fortius, which is faster, higher, stronger. And I think what I've learned through my whole life is the danger if you attach to one fixed identity. If you lose that, then you wake up thinking, who am I? What's my purpose? And how do I even function in daily life? So I was, in many ways, I was paralysed from the neck down in 2016, and that challenged who David Smith was. I didn't want to be a spinal cord injury person. I didn't want to say I'm someone with cancer, but what I realised is that we have multiple identities of who we are. We're a son, a brother, a partner, we could be a hairdresser, a lawyer, there's this fluid identity, almost like a river. And I try to see myself now as identifying to someone who my core beliefs are. So I'm somebody who I'd like to think is authenticity is important to me, humility is important to me, being a good human being, someone who's adventurous, resilient, persistence, and ultimately someone who's fun. I think sometimes in life we lose that childhood beauty of just being children. And those beginners, going out every day with beginner eyes, and we get so used to the world around us, we start to take things for granted. And I think that's the problem with a fixed identity. And that's something I'm very mindful when someone asks me that question, who are you? We are more than what we do. And I think it's the same if you have a Range Rover and you identify as a Range Rover, it kind of sounds a little bit crazy. So it almost sounds crazy to say I'm an athlete, because sport was something I did, but it's not who I am. It's just part of who I am. And the person I show up every day with, I always say to life, we can either turn up to life and let things happen to us, or we can show up. And if we're showing up, we're hopefully showing up with the core beliefs and core values that we hold dearly to ourselves. And that's how I try to show up and identify every day. It's a work in progress. I don't always get it right.
You're always evolving, right? But
always
I think
evolving.
So much of what you just said comes with maturity. The young David, you said it, what you just said if I'd asked you 20 years ago. But that evolving purpose, if you like, and identity, that's, there's certain things that are constant. You're always a son, always certain things. But that maturity that you've got reflecting on it now, take me back to a young David starting out. What were the early kind of inspirations and influences that shaped what became your career?
Yeah, so I grew up in a little Highland village in Scotland, and I was massively influenced by sport. There's a local sport called shinty, which golf kind of came from, but shinty is almost, if you try to visualize Irish hurling, lacrosse, ice hockey, it's a mix of all those things, but basically you have it's a 12-a-side game, and it's a bunch of Highlanders chasing a little leather ball. But within that, I mean, as soon as you can walk in the village I grew up in, you have a shinty stick put into you. But at the same time, my parents put skis on my feet. I went to karate. I went in the summers, I water skied. So sport was a huge part of my life. I wasn't very academic. I struggled to focus in the classroom. I'd look out the window and look into the hills and the mountains. And I'm like, I want to be up there. So I almost seen it as quite entrepreneurial. I used to leave to go to school in high school. And rather than going to school, I'd go to the ski school, dump my school stuff, take my skis and go up the hill and ski instruct for a day until we were caught doing that. But so I grew up in the Highlands, massively influenced by sport. A lot of my best friends went to the Olympics at a pretty early age in skiing. But for me, I remember learning a lesson on the shinty. I feel that sport teaches you great character strengths and character lessons at a young age. It installs you with beautiful values. And there was a volunteer, Rob Ritchie, who coached the shinty team, and he always said to us, and I remember this as a sort of 10-year-old, he said, guys, if you win with humility, and if you lose with dignity. Always shake your opponent's hand, always look them in the eyes and shake the hand. Those lessons have carried me all the way through life. And at the same time, also, I was doing a lot of karate. So I had to, and it was full contact. It wasn't sport karate, it was traditional karate. So I ended up with I think it was almost 8 broken noses in total. But I learned how to get hit, get myself together, stand back up, go again.
Yeah.
I also grew up in a small council estate in the part of Scotland I lived, and it was like one big family. I think there was about 150 houses, and we all knew each other. We were all out playing football, shinty, till like 10 o'clock at night on summer's nights. If you fall over, cut yourself, you had to get back up. So you're learning resilience, you're learning persistence, you're learning all these things that were never taught at school. Emotional intelligence was never taught. You know, how to manage the psychology of your mind, understand your emotions. It was never taught. It was just like, get on with it. But actually, if you go upstream and start peeling that back, you're learning a lot of great values. And I believe that everything I learned in sport at a young age prepared me to compete at a high level, but more importantly, prepared me to sit in front of an oncologist and be told that I'm potentially going to die, or to wake up from a surgery where there was a mistake and it paralyzed me from the neck down. I think all of those lessons in sport as a youngster ultimately gave me the mindset and the physiology to deal with cancer and paralysis, but cancer and paralysis taught me how to live. And I think as a youngster, it was all go, 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 go. And now I'm more about, rather than being a human doing, I'm more of a human being now, and just learning how to be in a body that doesn't fully work, in a world that's not designed for a body that doesn't fully work. And I've probably found more gratification in the simple things now than I ever did as a kid.
Yeah.
But I think everything I experienced as a kid prepared me for this moment.
Oh, so much there. From that last comment, where how important is it to be present and actually appreciate the journey, because you don't know what's around the corner. How many people are looking down the line at the goal? It might be that, you know, how you would have been the Olympics and so on, but actually are you enjoying the moment? You're enjoying the training, you're enjoying this moment with your trainer, with your friends.
The process.
The process. Yes. And then that, again, that maturity, you've got to understand that the sort of graft you put in, the habit forming, the resilience from busting your nose to showing up every day. Because some of the things you just said there, right? The milestones in your life where they have been shockingly bad news, and yet you're here smiling. You've been an absolute gent from the moment you've arrived, in positive, and the weather's good and so on. And how have you managed that? Because that part of the kind of almost like the mental health side of things. There's the moment you're told, you know, the paralysis, to then like, okay, life's not going to be the same. How unfair is this? You know, why me? And how many people do that in context of all sorts of other things, to then go, all right, reframe it, man up, get on with it, show up. How have you gone about that?
So I think if I go upstream again, back to childhood, I grew up in an era there was no mobile phones, there was no technology. Social comparison didn't really happen in my village. We had purpose. We were part of the shinty team. The whole village brought the village together. So it was a community spirit. If you were struggling, there was people there to pick you up. It's like no one ever does it alone, and it takes a village to build an adult. And in a village environment, you really get that. And especially in that era, there was no mobile phone. So I was out playing. So ultimately, I was accessing flow states and states of high focus all of the time, my whole childhood.
Without even being conscious of it. We know how good that is for us.
Exactly. Now. So I was getting all these neurochemicals that were released at a young age. Every single day I had karate, swimming, water skiing. I was never sat. I never really just sat around. I always just moved my body. If there wasn't anything on sport, I'd be in my own garden hitting a ball, kicking a ball off the wall. So I never really understood. I was blessed. I didn't really have hardships as a kid. I just fell in love with my sport. And then what I realized is, as you grow up, and now there's mobile phones, and I'm human. I'm not immune to anything. I look at other people who have. I sit now in cafes and watch people move their bodies, and think, oh, wow, I'd love to be able to move my body one more time. If someone had said to me, look, you can have one day with your body, and then that's it, I would almost want to take that one day. Yeah. Because I watch everyone walk through the park and they're stuck to their devices. And in many ways, I feel blessed, because I feel that the paradox of being paralyzed is that everywhere I go, I have to be present. I have to be mindful. I can't be mindless and walk around looking at a device, because I only have one arm. It's on a walking stick. And if I don't consciously think about every step, I'll fall over. So I have to notice every single bird. I have
so
to
it's
notice
a conscious thing for you.
Conscious,
every time you're
everything.
moving.
Every time I move,
So something we
conscious.
take for granted in terms of context of walking around, you've got to...
I'm constantly conscious. So also that's very draining, right? So that's exhausting. So I get to the end of the day and I'm completely exhausted. But what it does, it means I'm fully present in every single moment. Yeah. And I think the big realization came to me was when I realized that I can die from what I have. I started to really reflect. And then a few things happened. 4,000 weeks. 4,000 weeks is all we'll get from the day we're born if we live to 80. That's 960 months. That's all we get. Yeah. We get 18,400 seconds a day. Now, if you're not an insomniac, you're going to sleep for almost 26 years of your life. Then you're going to spend another 3-4 years stuck in traffic jams. You're going to spend hours arguing with people online. You're going to spend another 3 years scrolling. Yeah. So before you know, you've narrowed it right down to, you may only have, it's still good news, you might only have 20 years of doing the things you're really passionate about. And I think that's where I realized that lying in hospital. I've spent 14 years in and out of hospital. And I lie in hospital and I look out, there was 1 year I was in for a year and I didn't breathe fresh air for 9 weeks. And
for the person that was just living and breathing the outdoors,
all I wanted to do was move, and it was horrendous, and I became a prisoner of my own body. But I'd have people come and visit me and complain about the weather. They'd come in and they'd be like, how are you today? And they'd be like, not bad. And I was like, why not just change that to, yeah, I'm good?
Yeah.
Rather than not bad.
Reframing.
Yeah. And then moan about the weather.
Makes you feel better by saying it. In fact, it reminds me of a chat we had in the build up to this where I told you I went to see my grandfather in hospital who was ill. I think he'd had a stroke. And it was a rainy day. I was about 14, 15, just like you. Not into the same level as well, but I was always on the bike. I was always hitting a ball. Yeah. I was kicking a ball and just generally being outside climbing trees, all that stuff. And I looked out the window and I think I'd said it to almost try and cheer him up. But I said, you're not missing anything. I was going to go for a bike ride this afternoon, but it's pouring with rain. And there was this pause and he said, John, I'd do anything to be out there. And like I said, I was on my bike, went for the longest ride I've ever been, pouring rain, loved it. And that mindset, learning from perspective of someone older, and you said it to me, someone that's got a perspective of death. They've without doing a calculation, they've worked out that I may never get out there again. Yeah. So for me, take it on. And I think maybe some of these experiences and me learning from you right now in these conversations and other people the same, appreciating, live in the moment and don't, this is the other thing with you, right? Don't make excuses and say, why me? And, it's so unfair and so on. Actually, do you know what? Just reframe it and go and do it.
And I've never had that. I've never had the why me. And I think there's the locus of control. Either you think the world is happening to you or you can have impact in the world. And there must have been somewhere in my upbringing, and I think possibly in karate, and again in sport, where we were taught that it's the dichotomy of control, really. You have control to how you respond. The world can happen around you. You don't have control of the things happening around you, but you have total control of how you respond to those situations, whether that's cognitively, physically, but that takes work.
Yes.
And I think we expect all of these humans who are adults to just function in a society. And what I started to realize is that when we're born, if you think of your brain as the hardware and your mind as the software, and your parents were the computer programmers, they're not world-class programmers.
No.
And then you go to school and you're influenced by some of your mates who are maybe not that great an influence, and then this is all shaping your core beliefs and who you are and your identity and where you fit in with your social group, and that becomes the in-group and other groups become the out-groups. And then all of a sudden you're an adult man, and no one's ever taught you about emotional regulation. No one's ever taught you how to deal with your thoughts and your feelings, and your thoughts and your feelings create emotions. And if emotions are external and your feelings are internal, and then that becomes your behaviors and your actions, no one's explained that to you. So you're running around with this computer system that it's never had an update in the 200,000 years that Homo sapiens have been alive. Yeah. It's still the same brain. Rather than dealing with saber-toothed tigers and hunter-gatherers, and we're now dealing with emails, but we're now expected to respond to every single message and email within instance. So we're now taking our phones to the bedroom, we're waking up and looking at phones right away. So we've almost become, it's like the singularity has already happened. The device has become part of us. So when you ask about who you are, a lot of people could answer, oh, I'm my phone. Because it's such a big part of who they are.
Yeah, and then terrifyingly for some people, it could be they spend X amount of time, particularly these kids, on games, or the whole TikTok doom scrolling, which we just are finding out more and more is crushing self-esteem and mental health. And I think you touched on it just then. You mentioned saber-tooth tigers and so on, going back a long time. We're still learning about Bunsen burners and sort of algebra at school, which unless you're academic or you're going to be a scientist, you're not going to need. Why are we not learning about stuff that we've finding out about now? Yeah. And financial literacy as well. Like we're all going to have a mortgage or rent, potentially.
Just know how to live in society.
Yeah, totally.
And I think that's, one of the big turnarounds for me was when I was paralysed, and somebody brought me Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And that was a very profound book to read at that point, because it explained about everything can be taken from you, but no one can take your thoughts and how you perceive the situation. But there was another thing that he spoke about in that book was around stimulus-based response, and how we become very reactive in a reactive world. So we go out, things happen to us, and we react, and then we regret it, because the way the mind works, that we react in an limbic response to that programming that's already there from our childhood. It may serve us, it may not serve us. If we're lucky, it serves us. But if we've got some gremlins in the system, it's not really going to serve us. And then learning just to have that space where you can take a breath, and then you can respond with the values that are important to you. Yeah. And then that carries over then into everyday life. When you walk through the park, you can connect to your in-breath. I'm alive, smile, then I exhale, and I notice the world around me. And that brings you into the present moment. Yeah. But unfortunately, the way the mind is programmed, it either wants to be in the past, or it's anticipating a future. And it's like, I need to get to the next destination. And for me, the beauty with cancer, the beauty with the life I live in a weird way, is it really drives in how important the present moment is, and to be in love with the present moment, to be in love with as it unfolds, to be fully in it, not thinking I need to get to the next place.
You've articulated that so well. And I think, in context of human beings, your journey's been extreme. It's been savage, the things that have happened to you. And yet I'm only sitting with you now, talking to you, having pivoted from a business point of view and a life point of view, because things went wrong for me and things were going wrong for me. And how I dealt with that initially wasn't good. It was to almost wallow and look at why this happened, and, blaming myself, other things, external circumstances, and how unlucky am I, all this sort of stuff. And yet the context of then what I'm so enjoying now, this conversation and a number of other things that I'm doing, you saying that you're happy now in context of the fact that you've had to go through the joy of cancer. Why is it that we as human beings almost need to have a trauma or something go really quite seriously wrong for us to then go, I'm going to live now? Yeah. What's that about?
I think it's interesting, right? Because I think if you experience, there's the meditation memento mori, which is to meditate about your own mortality. And it's not to be morbid and be like, oh my God, I'm going to die, because we're all going to die. It's to actually make you live. And there was a great extreme athlete called Shane McConaughey, and he actually died when he was, I think, 39, but he was a pioneer of extreme skiing. And I remember watching him as a kid, and he said, I'm not scared of death, I'm scared of not living. Yeah. And that was so powerful to me. And I remember speaking to a group of people not so long ago, and I asked them what their passions were in life. And, they were saying fishing and cricket and all sorts of stuff. And I said, when did you last do that? And they go, 10 years ago. So, man, you need to make time for your passions. And I think that we just get caught so much up in stuff that we're on this treadmill of life, and life happening to us, and that's what's impacting mental health, and it's filtering in all parts of our life, and we don't know how to deal with our emotions and our thoughts. Then a trauma hits, like a massive thing hits you, and then all of a sudden it's like a wake up. Wow, okay, actually, wow, I don't need to buy the next car to be happy. I don't need all this hedonistic stuff. You have much more, as Aristotle would say, you have much more of a fulfilling life if you find meaning and purpose in your life, not just hedonistic. And I like to look at it as a coin. If you're all about meaning and purpose, you probably won't get invited to any parties. But if you because you're maybe a bit too serious, and I went through a little phase of that, I'd be invited to a party and I'd be talking about memento mori and philosophy, and people were like, don't invite Dave back, he's doom and gloom. So you have to have a little bit of hedonistic fun, but if your life is purely about hedonism, then you're going to feel very empty. Yes. And unfortunately, I do think I do think there is a trauma aspect to it. If you do get either hit with a big T or a little T that wakens you up to this, oh my God, I am going to die, or I'm now being challenged. And for me, I've always been a happy person. I've always been positive. I've always liked to think through sport, taught me to be mindful and be in the present moment. Because if you're skiing down a hill at 60 odd mile an hour, you have to be in the moment. If not, you're going to crash. And same as you would know on your bike, you have to be present. But it's everything around that you're maybe not noticing. So I think if you go on a bike and you're trying to smash and attach to data and everything, you miss the trees, you miss the birds, you miss the beauty in it. And that's always the danger when you're a professional sportsman. You're always focused on the outcome. And you may say, I'm in the process, but you maybe don't really understand fully what the process is. And it is, you know, when you make a coffee in the morning, are you mindfully making that coffee? Do you feel the cup? Do you taste it? Because I can't feel anything really in my body. So when I'm holding the cup, I'm really trying to feel it. And that takes my mind out of all the nonsense.
Mindfulness.
It takes me into the present moment, which then ultimately is probably why I came into here smiling, happy, because I know the chemicals. If I smile, if anyone smiles, if you're listening, just smile. You can't be unhappy when you smile, because it releases chemicals in the brain.
Being positive, giving off positive vibes, you attract it, right?
Yes.
You know, I was looking at all the conversations we had and the sort of message banter to actually then properly meeting you to then this conversation. There's a whole positive vibe that's, you know, I guess it's magnetism, right? Whereas if you come in and said, oh, you know, train was late, cats just died, I'm going to be a bit like, oh, well, it can only get better, and how do I pick this up? And we're on and people often start conversations like that, right?
Yeah, they do.
So one thing that interests me, you've been awarded an MBE, you've won countless medals. In context of your life, you know, you got up this morning and you got yourself here, and you know what I mean? There must be some real fundamental kind of like challenges, but what is your greatest achievement?
I'd say my greatest achievement is having an impact on other humans to live a more flourishing life, to understand the gift that we actually have, that it's a miracle we're even here. I often think that, you know, people don't like to think of their parents making love, but if your dad hadn't courted your mum, you wouldn't be sat here now. The mere fact that we've actually ended up sitting here is a miracle out of 9 billion people on the planet, 4 million years of evolution, and we've ended up sat here today is an absolute miracle, and that's why I don't take it for granted. So to answer that question is I think my greatest gift to the world is to try and get those who have maybe not suffered or faced mortality to understand just how beautiful every moment in life can be. Now, it's not to say that life is not going to be hard. I have bad days. I have days where I wake up and I'm like, this sucks. Being paralysed sucks. Having tumours sucks. The fact that there's no cure for my tumour sucks. There's days where I throw plates at the wall and cry, but that's also okay. And you know, and that's understanding your emotions and thoughts, and as they come into your brain.
Being present again in the moment, allowing yourself to be authentic.
Allowing to be authentic, and authenticity is important to me.
I can tell.
But I think if I could take anything away to say I did, that's my purpose. Because I think purpose can't be about you. Purpose has to be about something greater than oneself to have a really fulfilling life. If not, it becomes very selfish and maybe not so much narcissistic. I think there's times in my life where I had to chase to be a medalist, and then it was all about me. But that's not my greatest thing. That goes back to that maturity. I mean, at the time, that was your goal. And you achieved it. So well done. But by achieving the goal, you knew what you had to do, which gives you great perspective now when it comes. And it goes back to what you said when you ultimately came out of the operation's gone wrong, and you're like, well, I've now got to reset my goals, but I'm used to doing that. And what are my goals? And in context of that same kind of flow of conversation, sitting here now, how would you define success? Living by your values. So that starts with self-awareness. You need to know what your values are. Many people don't know what their values are, because you can train 3 things in life. You can train your craft, your body, and your mind. We invest massive amounts into the craft. Some of us invest into the body more than others. Very few of us invest maybe in the mind, because we don't really understand. A lot of our perceptions around psychology and training the mind is maybe lying on a sofa with a psychologist, but it's not. There's so much we can train in the mind, and if we start with self-awareness and actually just knowing what our first principles are, who are we, who do we want to show up as every day? If you know your values and you know who you are, you're more likely to choose a career that fulfills you and has real meaning and purpose in life. And from there, then you're living in line with your values. And if you're living in line with your values, then I think that that's success.
Yeah, fair play. I love that analogy, the whole explanation. And in context of you moving forward, you're a Nike athlete. What are you kind of looking for in context of next challenges, things ahead? Just come back from Jamaica for your own training and so on.
Yeah.
What is the challenge and the purpose ahead of you now?
To stay alive.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest, someone asked me, why do you train now? And I says, I train to stay alive. Sport was taken from me, the games, the Olympics, the Paralympics, everything was taken away from me because of the tumor and the paralysis and the life I've been given. Yeah. And so I could hold resentment and be bitter about that, but I'm not. I'm like, well, you know what? I can still be an athlete. Just because I don't have a national team written on the back doesn't mean I'm not an athlete. And Nike always say anyone who moves their body is an athlete. And they have another great slogan, there is no finish line. And I hold that very dear to me and think, well, I'm going to show up every day. I'm going to push my body. I'm going to go. I want to do Mont Blanc, Tour Mont Blanc. I want to cycle in the Alps. I want to go skiing again. I want to try and do a 10K. I've got so many plans that that my athlete self-identifies to, but also I want to make a difference to the world. I don't want to die and have it to have all just been about me enjoying my sport. I genuinely want to make a difference to cancer care. I want to get more kids into sport because I understand the benefit of the mental aspect that sport plays, not to get kids onto national teams, just to get them enjoying moving their bodies. Yeah. And I think if I can stay alive, that's my number one goal, is to stay alive. And then the second one is to make a difference.
I love that, because the way you've explained that is, so many of us take it for granted just being alive, right? And I can be guilty of that. I think we ultimately all can. And then you take someone like, for example, Chris Robshaw, who I filmed with on the same program. Yeah. And when he was playing for England and Harlequins and training every day with a goal and a purpose for the next game, the next World Cup. Yeah. And then when ultimately someone like that retires, this goes back to your context and kind of reference of losing their identity. Yeah. And then actually, do you know what? I don't need to do any training and so on, but we all do.
We all do.
So I think you just, it's a really valuable,
the body's
inspirational thing to be putting across. It's like, we actually just being healthy, being alive, being the best version of ourselves. And probably the last thing we've got time to talk about is, why do people not spend time on themselves? That self-development sort of things, which, and you've got to be careful. I have this with my kids now, right? So I'm learning from you today. I'm going to be imparting information to them, and it's going to be like, oh, Dad.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go. And because you get passionate about something, and it's not always the best way to. Yeah. But you're learning. You want to sort of pass that on. But so many people don't seem to want to spend that time on themselves, and without picking anything, I'm going to pick Love Island, bad example. They'll just sit and watch that all evening, Netflix. Yeah. And then get up the next day and then wonder why perhaps they're not moving forward. Yeah. So without being judgmental, because neither of us are that, but just how do you kind of almost get that message across that do more and you can have more? And
it's a hard one, and I guess we could talk about it for hours, right? Because we could dive into evolutionary psychology, social psychology, but kids don't do as they're told, they do as they see. So they watch what the parents do. So if the parents are telling them to do X, Y, and the parents are doing A and B, the kids won't do X, Y. They'll follow the parents' lead because they're watching to what they're doing. And then you fast forward that on, and the pressures of work and the stress, people come home, they just want to sit and watch something that's completely mindless and it's nothing. They're not being told what to do. So I often if I tell people what to do, they won't do it. I often say, well, you have to encourage people. Yeah. It's like taking the horse to water, it's not going to drink. So how do I encourage people? Well, I need to find out who they are, their values, what they value. So everyone values their family. So if you're going to have a conversation with someone and say, well, if you invest in yourself, you're going to see your child go to school. You're going to see your child grow up and get married and have grandchildren. If you don't invest in yourself, and not to say if you invest in yourself, that stuff, you still might die young, but you want to give yourself the best chance. So if you don't do anything and you eat poor foods, you get rubbish sleep, you're turning on so many genes that are cancer promoting, and you're shifting your immune system, that you're really not giving yourself the best chance to grow old and see your grandchildren. Yeah. So I think everyone values family. And then you're like, well, how do I take that and run with it? And that's super hard, because you're trying to change habits, you're trying to change ingrained things, you're also trying to play with neurochemicals, and the neuroscientists behind Netflix, TikTok, Instagram, they know you better than you know yourself. So they've designed these products so that you will sit and watch them. And for me, I value health. Health is my number one value. So everything I do, I'm either moving towards that value or I'm moving away from it. So if I put a box of cookies in the fridge, I'm going to eat them, because willpower is not strong enough. We can't rely on willpower. We are, instant gratification. Our willpower is not enough. So we need to go beyond willpower. And that's where, again, we come back to values. What do we value in life? If we value our health, then we're going to have to make some tough decisions sometimes that don't give us that instant gratification.
But there's a power of that discipline, isn't it? If you can instill that discipline in, and you had it with sport.
Yeah.
And by default, we both had it by just wanting to be outside. We didn't realise how, but there's so many kids, and particularly the distractions. And you said it, sweets, chocolates at the front of the aisles, down by the checkout, then the whole social media gaming. It's hard.
It's hard.
The bit I've tried to integrate into conversations with my kids is almost like your future self thanking you. There was part of me that didn't think I'd get to 46.
Yeah.
And clearly, as 46, you wished you'd looked after yourself better when you were younger and not done some of the things you did, whatever they may be.
Yep.
But I just see that glazed look when it's like, because they're there. So it's, but I think the whole, like, I try and do a workout every morning to keep fit and spend time on being the best version of myself, and hopefully.
And they'll see that.
Hopefully they'll see that.
They'll watch that. I think if we overparent and we force them to do stuff and drag them to sports and coach them and, almost trying to live our life through them, then I think I don't think that's the great ingredient.
I think a lot, I'm guilty of that in context of certain things, and I think all parents empathise with that, but then it's so difficult in the moment, isn't it? But you can see, even with what I just said there, it makes so much sense. And I'm talking to my daughter's saying stuff, and it's almost like, are you done now, Dad?
Are you done?
And I go back to what I was thinking. I go back to TikTok.
Yeah, TikTok, and understanding a teenage brain and a teenage mind and how that works and the physiology of a teenager, and ultimately think if you support them, you give them love, and you create an environment around them which has huge amounts of stability.
Yes, well said.
And I think that would probably give them the best, but then they're going to have outside influence. I mean, it's super hard, right?
I know. No, I'm not suggesting we're not going to solve that.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
I would love to talk to you for longer, but we're out of time. But I've learnt loads from talking to you. You're a real inspiration, David. So thank you for making time.
No, thank you very much, John, and thank you. It was an honour. Thank you very much.